Welcome to the Journey of an Aesthete podcast, a comprehensive examination of all things aesthetic, the arts, the humanities, and what it means to be human. This is Journey of an Aesthete, and I'm very pleased, in fact overjoyed, to have Mike White from the Projection Booth podcast on my show. I can't say enough good things about your show and what you do for cinema and podcasting and all the rest of it, and I'm happy to have you on my show for at least a couple of reasons. One reason is that I love the diversity of films you feature on your show. I love your colleagues, Heather Drain, and the other folks that you have on, the way you talk about movies. And especially, I like your approach and your attitude. You have a very non-combative, non-ideological, very, at times even erudite and sophisticated way of talking to your guests. And at the same time as all that, you also have a very personable nature, and there's no pretension, and there's nothing negative. It's just like sort of when people ask me about different podcasts, I say, well, I think the way Mike White handles or talks with guests should be an ideal, that he should teach classes and how to conduct interviews. I really think that. I don't know. I hope I'm not being too effusive, but that's kind of...
Flattery will get you everywhere.
That's kind of one of the reasons I had you on my show, because I look up to your style. So generally on this show, what I do is I start with a linear chronology of the guests. So basically the beginnings of what they've been doing, whatever it is we're discussing. It could be sculpture, it could be, poetry, it could be movies, it could be television, could be all kinds of things. And then out of that very linear chronology, non-linear things will start to happen. Things will pop into the guest consciousness, and ideas will come up and bubble to the surface. So what's your feeling about proceeding that way, starting from the beginning of how your podcast came to be? Or we could even go back further. You could talk about the movies that you loved when you were a kid, or your just basic biographical information, anything that you think is important or germane. You can speak what you think about that. So
sure. I'm in your hands.
So, biographically, you've had this since, 2012, this podcast?
I think it's 2011, I want to say.
2011. And so, I guess I want to ask is, how did you get as good as you are in doing this movie program? And moreover, when did you start to really educate yourself or become, literate about cinema and the movies? And talk a little bit about how that came to be, and what comes to mind when I ask you about that?
Well, I don't know how good the podcast is. It definitely could be better. But I mean, I've been doing it since 2011, and so maybe practice makes proficiency, maybe. I mean, there's that whole Malcolm Gladwell thing about, you have to practice for 10,000 hours. I'm definitely not at 10,000 hours yet, but I'm getting close.
Yeah, well, you've done a lot of shows, so that's part of it. But I'm interested in what were the first movies you saw that knocked you out and made you say, well, I love movies. Or maybe it was books. Maybe it was English literature. It could be anything. It could be sports. I don't know. Going back to the very beginnings, what were the first stirrings of your own artistic journey or the arts that you happen to appreciate or learn about?
Well, I don't want to sound trite or anything, but my biggest influence when I was a kid was the Star Wars films and the original, what they call now A New Hope. I mean, I saw that when I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it just knocked me on my ass. I just fell in love with it. It opened up so many things, and it gave me so many things, and really helped kind of form my childhood. So when people talk about, oh, George Lucas ruined my childhood, it's like, no, actually, it was my childhood. And every year, we're getting Star Wars toys, and then eventually, around the time of Return of the Jedi, kind of grew out of it. But I still loved movies, still watched a lot of movies, and that was a pastime that my mom and I enjoyed. We would go to the movies quite often, and then that morphed into a pastime for my friends and I. So we would go to the local video store, and this was the era of VHS was happening when I was coming up on my teenage years was when VHS was really there, and by the time I was in high school, Blockbuster Video had already killed a lot of the mom and pop shops. Yeah. And I would go over there with my friends, and we would look for whatever we thought was some of the stranger fare. And once we had a car and we were able to go to the video store, nothing was going to stop us.
I mean, that's great because I'll see your age. So you and I are, I think, roughly close in age. I'm 51.
Okay, yeah, I'm 47.
You're 47, so we're both Gen Xers, hopefully proud. At least I'm a proud Gen Xer. Hopefully you're a proud fellow Gen Xer. So Star Wars is a part of our childhood. Star Wars is this because I saw it in '77, and that's just this big event. Clearly, this huge big event. I mean, speaking a little differently, for me that year, the movie that made the greater impact would have been Annie Hall. I was a kind of a strange kid. Because they came out the same year. Yeah. But they both made an impact. But it was Annie Hall was the one that I think I was drawn more towards. But I remember seeing Star Wars and being impressed by not only the size of the theater, but also the rapt attention of the entire audience. Many of whom were, I think, 8 years old, 10 years old. That somewhere between 8 and 14 or something. It's a large amount of people in that age group in the theater, and I remember that it was almost like a religious experience, or at least like going to church in a way. Yeah, the seriousness with which people took this film, that first Star Wars film.
Yeah, apparently I was pretty good in the theater. My mom would take me when I was very young. I remember being taken to a lot of shows that were fairly inappropriate, things like Young Frankenstein or Murder by Death or. I mean, they weren't necessarily taking me to R-rated fare that was, the violent or overly sexualized those things. Yeah. But, I remember watching All That Jazz when it was first on VHS, and that was actually where I learned what the F word meant. I was like, what is this? Why do they keep saying this word? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I saw All That Jazz in the theater.
Oh, nice.
So I had a kind of a child. You probably would not approve of the kind of film viewing I did because I did all the R-rated movies. I mean, for example, I saw you name it. I saw Lipstick as a kid. Okay.
Oh, wow.
In the theater, and I saw Straw Dogs as a kid in the theater. So I was watching. I basically had Quentin Tarantino's film viewing habits. Basically the same because he saw those as a child. I believe. And so there's that similarity. So yeah, I have trouble relating when people talk about how there's all these things they could not watch or did not watch. I have trouble often relating to that because I kind of watched everything. And then, of course, go ahed.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And, of course, people have very strong opinions about that because you expressed, what is the movie you said that you said you saw a couple of R-rated movies? Death Becomes Her, was that the one you mentioned? I remember.
No, it's Murder by Death.
Murder by Death, yeah, the Agatha Christie. So I guess I don't know where people stand on that. Is that an okay movie for a 14-year-old to see or not with Alan Bates? And I don't know. I think of that as kind of a very innocuous film myself, but I have no idea. Maybe, I'm so naive. I found out that kids were not allowed to watch certain episodes of 8 is Enough.
Oh, wow.
Just because Tommy Bradford was out of line, like certain religious homes, and this was evidently a thing. There's whole shows that, parents put their foot down. You can't watch this. You can't watch certainly couldn't watch Charlie's Angels or Three's Company. So there's a lot of strict child rearing, certainly, in this country in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, my folks were weird. Like, there were scenes in The Jerk that they would have me leave the room for, but then also scenes, I sat and watched The Shining with my folks. Or, the story I always tell is the first time I was refused entry to an R-rated movie, I had already seen, I saw Blues Brothers when it came out, so I was 8 years old when I saw Blues Brothers, and then I think it was 2 years later going to see Blade Runner and going up and trying to buy tickets to Blade Runner and getting refused. And I was like, no, my mom's just parking the car. And the woman behind the counter is like, yeah, right, kid. And then when my mom comes up, she's like, what's the holdup? Why don't you have the tickets?
Right. I mean, these are things that are just kind of very personal. Just like cinema is both personal and collective. There's personal stories people have about their particular families or their particular viewing habits, and that's a very personal thing having to do with your religion you were brought up in, certainly, or not, or religion you weren't brought up in, or political affiliation, and all sorts of things. I guess the size of families too. So. So it was Star Wars, but then what happens after Star Wars?
Well, then what happens after Star Wars is Black Shampoo. By the time I was, it was probably, it was exactly December 26, 1988, I believe, when we rented Black Shampoo at Blockbuster Video. Wow. And it was me and three of my friends, and we couldn't believe this movie. It was just incredible.
You're watching this film at home on a VHS, this exploitation film, and so you're seeing it about 10 years after it was made, right? 11 years, right?
Well, it was made 76, and so this was 10, 12 years afterwards. Yep.
And so you're watching it on a VHS at home, and what was your? I know, didn't you list this as one of your favorite movies?
Oh, yeah.
You did, yeah. One of the things I like about your show, this is an aside, is that you champion movies like Black Shampoo that other people might disparage or you take seriously. I just want to say that's another thing I really like about you. Don't discriminate on the basis of these kind of categories of genre, and so you'll hold up Black Shampoo as an important film. So I applaud that. But anyhow, go ahead. So what went to you guys' mind? You're watching this film. Struck you about it?
Oh gosh, we really just couldn't believe that this was happening. And, I mean, there were, of course, there were the sexy parts to it, but the sexy parts weren't really that sexy because you were talking about people from the 1970s, and they're not necessarily the most attractive people in the world. But so there's that. There's the mafia connection. There's violence. There's there's a chainsaw fight in this movie. There's pool cues that are impaling people, and it was freaking nuts. And we had seen blaxploitation films before this, but just nothing at this level. And with that and the incredible score, we were just hooked. And then this became kind of our Rocky Horror, like to the point where we would rent it all the time. We assigned characters. We weren't necessarily doing like a shadow cast in front of our TV, but it's just like, we'll call my friend Leon, he's the chauffeur, so he becomes this character, and Steve is Mr. Jonathan, and his girlfriend is Brenda, and so everybody had a thing, and we would memorize the lines and things like that, and then start to make up stories about the movie, like where there were lapses in time. We'd be like, oh, well, what's happening during this time? Do you notice that she comes into the door here, and then it takes about 3 minutes before she actually walks in the door over here? What's happening? What's in that hallway?
Exactly.
We were nuts. We were, just stupid kids, but we had a lot of fun with this. And so, that's why it's like, I ended up watching this movie probably, between that and, the book tour I went on a few years ago where I was showing it around the country and stuff. I probably have seen that movie probably 500 times.
Wow. Well, there's movies I've seen 500 times. I've seen The Last Detail easily that many times, which is one of my favorite movies. I've seen maybe All That Jazz. I've seen maybe Tarkovsky's the stalker. Well, I'm exaggerating, maybe 10 times or in that. I mean, it's to really love something, like to love Black Shampoo. When you love a movie like that, you become an expert on it in a way, right? And when you become an expert on it, you're probably the best person to discuss it, if you think about it. So that's probably one of the things I like about your show is that, again, you come to the movie really knowing the film. And you recently I was listening to a show you guys did on Solaris, speaking of Tarkovsky, and you guys go to town on that film, and you talk about that film with a seriousness that I almost never hear. I mean, I've hung around some pretty highbrow film critics, but they don't get into the weeds like you guys do.
Wow.
You can see that you guys really love this film. You may not understand all of it, and you're grappling with it, but what I appreciate is the seriousness. You're like, well, we're going to try to figure this Solaris out and get inside this film. And in a way, to me, that's the same as Black Shampoo. You're kind of saying, well, this film, there's something unique about this film that you want to inhabit or understand. So so when you finally met Graydon Clark, because I'm getting too far ahead, and you had Graydon Clark on your show, or is that?
Yeah, I actually met him a few years prior to when he was on the show. I used to, when I graduated from college, I ran a fanzine for a lot of years.
Okay.
And had written about Black Shampoo. My friend Leon wrote about it with me. We had we would do these articles. It took me a long time before I actually had the gumption to actually write about it, because it was just this kind of sacred text for me. Uh-huh. And then it was probably like a year or so after I get this email out of the blue, and it's from Graydon Clark, and he says, "I hear you've been looking for me." And I'm just like, oh my God.
Wow.
So yeah, just the fanzine had traveled around.
What was that? What college did you go to, and what zine was that you published?
I went to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor.
Oh, that's a great school. Well, so you originally from the Midwest?
Yeah. I grew up. I was born in Ohio, and then I moved up to Michigan when I was 2, and so I've been here ever since.
That's fantastic. I went to. I was in Michigan for 4 years for Interlochen Arts Academy in Traverse City.
Oh, wow.
And I went there, and that's where I really opened up my mind to many things. I was a music major there, but that put me in Michigan for a long time, and I used to travel to Ann Arbor a lot. And so I miss those days.
It's a hell of a school.
Yeah, it's a great school, and Michigan's kind of underrated. I sort of think, Michigan, it's like it's pretty cool. It's not, so you were, and so the zine, I guess, happened while you were in college or after, because usually
afterwards.
Afterwards.
I was getting into zines. I had a friend of mine, Jeff, who actually was one of the original people that I saw Black Shampoo with. Mm-hmm. He found that there was a Tower Records, and I knew about the Tower Records because I was very into music in college. And he found that they had a whole zine section, and he picked up a zine called Asian Eye, and that ignited a lot of interest. I was already interested in Hong Kong films and had started tracking down Hong Kong movies. And it was like in that renaissance, like when John Woo was first being like talked about, in hushed tones, and Jackie Chan, like we already knew him from the Cannonball Run movies, and what was it, the Protector, but there was also Battle Creek or whatever, the Big Brawl is what they ended up calling it.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh yeah, he's making really good movies. You should check these things out. And so my friend was like, oh yeah, you like Hong Kong movies? Here's a whole zine about it. Yeah. And that really, again, lit a fire under me. I was like, wow, this zine thing is pretty cool, and started getting into those.
Well, the zine culture of the 90s was really, really extraordinary.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the zines. I was into Candy Strecker. Did you read her? I was into Candy Strecker. I was into Pagan Kennedy. I would read a lot of different zines in the 90s. That was kind of like, I guess, was that the golden age for zines, or people?
I think so. I think I came to the game a little late, but because things like Answer Me and some of those were already out there. I used to love, what was that guy's name? Dishwasher Pete. He had the whole thing where he would go around to all these different cities and wash dishes. And there was McJob that was fantastic.
Yeah, I read both those when I could. But, zines are works of art. They're just beautiful, works of art.
They're so personal.
They're personal, and people create them, and they're made with love. And they're actually, I think they're made with a lot of work and discipline. I mean, they're just, they're like a genre unto themselves, I think. So how long did you do that? Did you do that zine?
I did that for. I mean, the first couple of issues were like, glue stick, typewriter, those kind of things. I did those fairly quickly because they were like 8-10 pages, and then as I went along, I started to challenge myself more. I eventually got into desktop publishing. Eventually started getting it professionally printed, and that would take time and money. And so I think I did it for, probably about 10 years, something like that. And then I put together a collection of articles. That was probably 2010, somewhere around there. And then as I'm doing that book tour, I was down in Baltimore at Atomic Books, and there was a sign about the revenge of print. And I was like, okay, what is this? And they're like, well, we're asking people that used to do zines to do one final zine or one more zine, and to do it all old school, go back to the photocopier, those kind of things. And I was like, I can do that. I want to do that. So I did that one, which I think was issue 16, and then I did 2 more that were print on demand. And then I was like, you know what, by that time I was doing the podcast, I was like, I can't do both.
Yeah, so podcasting, so you clearly were starting to love movies, or had always loved movies, but what interests me, and because it's sort of to me a mystery, is your diversity of taste, because you like Black Shampoo, but you also, as I said, did this great episode on Tarkovsky's Solaris, and you've done episodes on Head Over Heels or Chilly Scenes of Winter, and even Revette films, and also classic Hollywood. And when did you start to grasp the entirety of cinema, or sort of start to expand out of it? Would you say it's Black Shampoo that did that, or possibly, or?
No, it was probably when I got into college. I mean, I was aware of other cinema. I had seen some classic films, but not that many. But fortunately, when I was getting into school, it was still the time of film groups and film co-ops, and they would run these different double, triple features on weekends. And there was a magazine in Ann Arbor called Current, and I think it still happens. And I would go through Current, and I would just look at all of these film listings and be like, okay, Friday night, I'm going to go see these 2 movies. Saturday night, I'm going to go see these 2 movies. And if I could, I might squeeze this one in and just have this all mapped out. So between classes, where I was taking film classes, and then this kind of self-education, then it was just like, it opened up my mind to so many things. I always have to credit a friend of mine who I lived with, one of our housemates, who came home one night and he was just like, I'm going to go over to, we had this thing called Top of the Park, where they would show movies at the top of this parking lot, and they had, it was kind of a festival. And he's like, I'm going to go see this movie. It's called Yo Jimbo. And I was like, Yo Jimbo, that is a hilarious name, because we lived with a guy named Jim, and we used to always call him Jimbo. It's like, that's a hilarious name. I want to go see that movie with you.
Yeah.
And that started a lifelong love of Kurosawa, because I had no idea that a samurai movie could be as funny as that movie is.
Speaking of Kurosawa, did you ever have a chance to see Ursula, his Soviet film, on the big screen?
I haven't yet, and I have managed to see a number of his things on the big screen. Not everything, of course, because he's done so many.
Yeah, he's so prolific.
But at school, they were offering, like, oh, yeah, we're going to show Ron this semester, or the Seven Samurai. There was a Japanese society up there, and they showed Seven Samurai on the big screen. It's just, oh, my God, it's just so glorious.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, kind of like anytime you discover something, and if you become an expert on it, you kind of learn something from it, don't you? You kind of grow. It becomes a
Oh,
part
yeah.
of you. And I would say that Black Shampoo was doing that for you as much as Kurosawa, as much as Jimbo, right?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of taught me film language, things that I didn't necessarily know.
Mhm.
I was learning more about editing than I had before. I mean, thank goodness for Earl Watson. There were things, I remember my first film class, like, okay, is there a name for this effect when you go from, color to a negative before a cut? And the guy's like, no, there's not a name for that. And I was like, oh, okay, because they use that all the time in Black Shampoo.
Yeah. That's film theory and film language, as you know, is its own thing.
Oh, yeah.
Its own world. And I have my own biases and opinions. We can get into that or not. But I've read all that stuff. Who are your teachers at your University of Michigan?
Well, I had Ira Konigsberg, who wrote the pretty well-known encyclopedia of film.
Yep.
I actually got into an argument once because he thought that Fistful of Dollars came before Yojimbo, and I corrected him in class. He was not a big fan of me.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, things are what they are. Things are made when they're made. The production date of a film is what it is,
Yeah.
What can I tell you?
And I had Frank Beaver, who actually helped out Altman on a couple things when Altman did a semester in Ann Arbor.
Oh, so you mean when he did his plays, the Secret Honor and that?
Secret Honor, yep.
Yeah.
So that's why we had Frank on that episode when we did that.
Yeah. Yeah, but so that means you had Donald Fried twice on your show? Because I know you had him on. I mean, you've done so many shows. I know you had Donald Fried on for Executive Action.
Yes.
And he was one of the writers.
Yeah, for both of those.
Yes, and Secret Honor. Okay, yeah. So he's a
And sometimes we might record an interview and split it up if it's too long, but I think with Donald Fried we actually did have him on twice.
Okay, so you go from a zine and you're taking classes at University of Michigan, and what would you say were the changes that were happening inside of you in your understanding of film? It could be genre, it could be actors that you fall in love with, or actors you fall out of love with, or actresses, or anything, or movies that maybe there was a style of movie that you suddenly liked that you didn't used to like or know about. I guess Kurosawa would be one example, but what are some other examples of that time in which you're starting to expand your consciousness, and what comes to mind when you think about that your journey?
The first thing that comes to mind is that one of so when I first got to college, I'm from this little town, it's like, I think, for freshman, junior, senior, sophomore, there was like one black person per class, and maybe there were like 2 homosexuals that I possibly knew. There were rumors, there were aspersions, these kind of things. Very, very small town life. And then I go to the University of Michigan and my mind is blown. And I will say my first reaction was one of absolute fear. And I'm just like, oh my God, there's so many different people. Look at all these Asian people and Jewish people. And I've never seen these types of people before. Oh my goodness. And then, and one of the things was like, oh my God, there was all these gay people, and I was in classes because I took a lot of women's studies classes, and I'm like, I'm in these classes with gay people, I can't handle it. And then by the time I'm a junior, one of my favorite memories was working at a Blockbuster Video where, for whatever reason, it wasn't even the classy Blockbuster, because we had 3 in town, and one was pretty upscale, one was pretty low scale, and one was middle of the road. I was in the middle of the road.
Okay.
We had the most incredible Almodovar collection that I had ever seen. Like everything, this was before they banned Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down.
Oh,
they had Dark Habits was there.
Oh, so you're talking about all the stuff in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all the young, handsome, gorgeous Antonio Banderas. And I would rent these movies and take them home, or not rent them, but had my pretty much you just take movies when you work there. Take the movie out, take it home, and it would be me and my 9 housemates, who, as far as I know, are all pretty straight white males, and we're all just watching these Almodovar films, and no one's like freaking out because there's gay content to it or anything, and we're just enjoying the movies to enjoy them. And I was like, that. So when you talk about how movies changed and how I changed with them, I mean, that was one thing where it's just like, oh, this is really nice.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So that's starting to happen, and you're starting to see these different kinds of movies. So from your first year at University of Michigan to your last year, clearly you're having a different response to having a lot of people around you from all walks of life. So that's starting to change. You're starting to get more comfortable with that, or you sort of figure, because I grew up in big cities like New York City, Manhattan. For example, you mentioned Black Shampoo. I saw Black Shampoo on 42nd Street.
Oh wow!
So as a child, okay. So
yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard for me to understand, I guess. But I've got a lot of small town in my background because my dad was a Hoosier. He's from Indiana, and of course, But I'm just saying, clearly something's starting to change in you, and you're sort of, I guess, getting comfortable around people, more comfortable. But do you think that part of that could be something in your nature, your character? Because one of the things I pick up from Projection Booth is you have a very high curiosity level, which I appreciate. And I think that curiosity translates itself into dealing with people really well, I think. So maybe you bring to the table, you may have been initially freaked out or overwhelmed, but I think that something kicked in that's inside of you that kind of maybe was more open to people, perhaps, or, brought some openness.
I really credit, I did some traveling when I was 17. My folks sent me over to the UK for a month.
Oh, wow.
And I really credit that for a lot because, again, coming from a smaller town, I mean, it wasn't like where I grew up was like, one main street and a street that crossed it called First Street, and that was it. I mean, it was a fairly big city, but it was just very, very white, very, very white, and it's like it's that whole like white flight from Detroit kind of thing. So we're in the suburbs, we're, downriver from Detroit, and so it's just like, pretty white bread kind of thing. But going over to England and then having to figure things out. Like I wasn't on my own when I was there, but it was enough that it's like, okay, get from where you're staying in Tolworth over here, get to Wimbledon and take the train to Waterloo Station, and then we're going to meet here, and that's when our day begins. And that was pretty much every day while I was over there. And just the idea of navigating trains was something I'd never done. I'd never taken public transportation before. So I always credit that as being something that really was a very formative experience.
What years would have those been that you were in Britain?
That was summer of 89.
Wow. See, summer of 89, I was graduating from college, from New Conservatory. And that must have been a time. You were traveling then. I started to do some travel. Am I right that was a big travel time for a lot of people in our age group? So for some reason, it seems like between 87 and the early 90s, maybe travel was a little more inexpensive then in those years. I don't know. It just seems like that's something people, I think, were able to do then.
It could be. I just remember seeing an ad late at night, probably while I was watching The Young Ones on MTV, and it was for a company called EF, Education Foundation. And it wasn't like you were going over as an exchange student. It was go over, spend 4 weeks here. We'll take you out pretty much every day, and you'll see different sites, different historical places. And then we did 2 weekend trips, one to Paris, and then one was supposed to be to Amsterdam, but they ended up canceling that. So I went to Germany instead because I had a German exchange student when I was in high school. So I went and visited him and his family. So, yeah, I was surprised, very surprised that my folks got behind this and sent me over. So now when I get put into a city or travel or anything, I always feel like I feel more comfortable. I don't know if I am more comfortable, but I'm just like, okay, let's go. Let's figure it out. Where's the metro stop? How do I speak the language? Let's do it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think outlook is really important, and I think a positive outlook. I think everybody's experience is so different, and I'm really convinced more. The older that I'm 51, the older I get, the more I'm convinced that there's not really a right or wrong experience. I mean, people just bring their own story to the table, and they just have to find a way to make that story mesh with what's going on. the best that they can. I think we all do that in various ways. So whether you're traveling to Great Britain or traveling to Calcutta, or you're going to travel and you're going to have to deal with whatever you experience, and that in turn is going to change you, right, in some way. Just like writing a zine will change you,
Right. I also think that my love of research helps out with that stuff, because before I go to a place, I tend to do a lot of research. And that same thing happened with the zine, happened in college, happened in high school, and now happens with the podcast.
Well, I definitely see that pays off in the podcast. So you definitely, so I'm sure you researched Tarkovsky and Solaris, right, when you did that show. You just didn't go in cold and
no.
Yeah. I know that's laughable to think about somebody going in cold with Tarkovsky, but who knows? But that really pays off. But do you find that you get frustrated with other people that don't want to do the research of the work, or they kind of want to coast, or I don't know, you might come in contact with people that, I'm not saying that they BS, but they kind of don't want to give it the same commitment. Do you find that you have to deal with that sometimes?
I deal with it more when I listen to other people's podcasts than necessarily the folks that are on my podcast.
Okay.
Most of the people that I have on are more than willing to do the work. And if they're not, they kind of don't get asked to come back.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I mentioned Heather, is it Heather Drain?
Mm-hmm.
Heather Drain is excellent on your show, but I want to make a special mention. I hope one person that comes to mind is pronunciation, is it Maitland Mcdonald?
Yeah.
She's a serious scholar, film scholar, and I really like her scholarship. I really love her work. She's done some good work, of course, on Dario Argento, which she's talked about, but she also did a really great stuff on 90s exploitation films, if I'm correct. Do you know the book I'm talking about? Something about filmmakers on the edge. Was that hers?
Gosh, I don't remember.
I think I still have that book, and it's interviews with like Wes Craven and Fred Olin Ray and Andy Sedaris and all kind of whole assortment. I think Graydon Clark is in there. I don't know, but she interviewed these exploitation. It's a huge coffee table book, but I think it's from the 90s. I think that's hers, because I know that she does stuff like that. But I always appreciate when she's on your show, because she always. Is there anything you want to say about her in particular? Or?
Well, yeah, she's another person that it is, she, like, a friend of mine once said, oh, you cover everything from the art house to the outhouse. And Maitland is another person who has no pretensions. And she will talk about anything, which I absolutely love. And that's what I love about so many of my co-hosts, is just they will talk about whatever style of movies. And just,
So they're basically all in with your project. So so everybody you have on is committed to your vision. And your vision is this highly inclusive vision. Just like on my show wants to be about all of the arts. Like I'm going to have a potter on this show. I don't care. The potter doesn't have to be famous. It's just somebody talks about pottery. I'll have a ballet dancer. Basically I aim to be as inclusive as possible and not just have any, and I really appreciate that.
Hey, art is art.
Yeah, absolutely. I still get in arguments with some cinema snobs about things like that. They can't understand why I like, some of the things I like. That's all. Just look at all the debates about Star Wars, right? People still debate. You have the anti-Star Wars crowd and the pro-Star Wars crowd, and they kind of duke it out. Do you ever get invited into those squabbles matches, or do you avoid them, or?
I try to avoid them. I know that, it's a tough situation because you're actually fighting against the guy who created the whole thing. Because it's like, dude, I like this movie from 1977. I don't like this version from 1997. Quit fucking with your own stuff.
Well, that's another. Yeah, we could go into the rabbit hole of George Lucas's oeuvre and the different films in there. Unlike you, I'm not an expert in Star Wars series. You are an expert, and so I defer. I defer to your judgment on that.
I don't know how much of an expert I am because I don't know any of this extended universe stuff. It's like
you stopped watching it, or
what's that?
Have you stopped watching them, or?
No, I still go to the theaters, but like when they're showing this character in the background, and people are like, "Oh, that's a foreskin nebula or whatever," and I'm just like, Who is that? I have no idea. Oh, well, they were on Rebels, and then they were also on the Clone Wars, and there's 15 books about them, and they once, sold shoes to Han Solo. And it's like, oh, of course they did, because everybody knows everybody in the Star Wars universe.
It's a universe, sure. I mean, I think that but the thing that marvels me, Mike, is the fact that humans create things like that. I mean, the fact that a human being, George Lucas, came up with that, inspired by religious traditions and mythology and heaven knows what else, in his own love of movies, that's pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. Like, it seems to me that even if you didn't like Star Wars, it seems to me that it would be incumbent about you to at least respect that. Right. Like, even if you didn't love it. That's what I don't get. I mean, there's something to respecting that, the fact that a human created that touched so many people, and that has such a long reach. That's pretty impressive. I gotta say, it's pretty impressive.
I mean, I understand there's sour grapes because it did change the way that people see movies. It changed the whole idea. I mean, it's the same trap that we're in right now, where it's like, I see the phenomenon of your opening gross and people chasing those numbers, and then also the weirdos who just like, oh, did you see the numbers this weekend? And this had 1.3 million. And it's like, who cares? Was it a good movie or was it a bad movie? Did you enjoy it? Did it say something? Right. And it's all about the money, and it's about the Rotten Tomatoes score. And it's like, just give me your own opinion. Can you do that rather than have all this schadenfreude about how much money it made or didn't make?
Yeah.
But, I mean, I kind of blame that going all the way back to, like, Star Wars and Jaws, where it's like the 70s cinema was just so groundbreaking. Yeah. And then it's like those two things come along, right punch and a left hook, and then it suddenly becomes, oh, now we have to worry about, blockbusters, and then it becomes the blockbuster summer, and now it becomes, did you make more money on this than you did last weekend? Is Endgame going to make more than Avatar? Who cares?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because you could say, well, Jaws and Star Wars. Some people say Jaws and Star Wars ruined cinema, or they can say that. But that's a very strange way of looking at cinema, because I'm not sure there is one narrative like that.
Right.
I mean, even because the real proof in the pudding or the eating is really highbrow film directors, when they're honest about their taste, always appreciate really well-made commercial films. Mm-hmm. Like an example of that is, Robert Bresson really loved, what was the James Bond movie that was out in '82 when his L'Agent was out? It was that Bond. He said he was impressed with it. Was it Living Daylights, or I don't remember, but
that would have been about the time I started watching Bond, so it might have been that, or Octopussy, or Never Say Never Again.
I think it was Never Say Never Again. And he actually had complimentary things to say about it as a film. And even like Andrei Tarkovsky was a fan of Terminator 2, I think, or like Terminator 2. Jacques Rivette.
What's not to love,
Yeah, Jacques Rivette, one of his favorite films is Showgirls, I think, which is interesting. I mean, these are all these little, because I think Jacques Rivette and Robert Bresson and Tarkovsky, they're not looking at these films in a sociological way. Like, they're not looking at the numbers. They're just responding to it on a visceral level as filmmakers, and appreciating it for what it is, It doesn't mean they love it. It doesn't mean that in some level what those films are doing aren't opposed to what their project is, of course. But they're able, I think, to get outside of their own, I mean? I think I think often artists sometimes can be like that.
Oh, yeah.
Which is good. I think George Lucas is like that. I think George Lucas, I mean, heck, George Lucas's early films are very different than what he went on to make, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he always talks about going back and making art films. I'm like, please, I want to see that.
He talks about it. He hasn't done it, but he talks about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I had Andrew Bajowski. I'm going to have Andrew Bajowski on my show, and he's a big fan of, he's a big fan of the Rocky series. And we talked a lot about the different Rockies. And I think he wrote an essay for M+1, I think, a few years back, where he opened up with George Lucas's statement about, I want to make a personal film. Mm-hmm. I think he said what you said here. I think he said, please do it. we're waiting for it. But that's he will or he won't.
I mean, when you look at THX 1138 and American Graffiti,
film. Those are both beautiful films.
It's like you can't get two more different films that actually kind of tell a similar story about people wanting to leave where they're at. Mm-hmm. But my God, they're gorgeous to look at. They're technically brilliant, and I want to see more of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's he's still. I don't know his age, but I don't think he thinks he's going to be around. But that's up to him.
Right.
So, do you want to talk about individual shows on your podcast?
Sure. I'm open to whatever you would like.
Chilly Scenes of Winter. That was a long show. I love the fact you had Daniel Kramer on and talk about Joe Maitland Silver's film. Take a little film like that and just devote 2.5 hours to it and talk to John Hurd and everybody, Amy Robinson. A show like that, when you prepare a show like that, do you just wrangle all the parties and say this is what we're going to do?
Yeah, with that one, Daniel actually came to me because I had not seen that movie before, and he recommended it, and he was able to actually give me a tip on Joan Maitland Silver's contact address because he had interviewed her before, I believe.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that kind of started the ball rolling. So when it comes to a show, I mean, I usually try to find the interviews first and see what I can get as far as that goes. And then with that film, since so many people were involved that still love it and who were so invested in it, I mean, having the 3 big producers on that with Griffin Dunn, Amy Robinson, and Mark Metcalf, that was fantastic. And then John Hurd still had a ton of great memories about it. So, yeah, I was able to get all those folks behind it as well, which was terrific.
Yeah, you have a show like that, but then you'll have your Manhunter show. Mm-hmm. And you have the great Tom Noonan on.
Oh, yeah.
Just an incredible artist and actor and writer. And just, your show will go there. If you'll get Tom Noonan, you'll get him on your show and he'll talk about his experiences. And when did you discover his work?
I think the first time I saw Manhunter probably when I was in high school on VHS. So yeah. I've been a fan of his since then, since he was such a standout. And then, I mean, we just recorded a show on Wolfen, and he had a really good part in that, which I had seen.
Albert Finney, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that Albert Finney?
Yeah.
God, I haven't seen that in ages. So you're going to do a show on Wolfen.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to listen to that. To that. That's it.
Had a really great conversation about that one.
Yeah, and you also did Looker.
Oh, yeah. I mean, another Albert Finney action film.
Yeah, Albert Finney. Pull things out of the hat. Yeah. You'll do a show on Looker.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Looker. Yeah. And that was one I heard another podcast talk about it, and I was just like, yeah, you guys, okay, yeah, you're talking about this movie, but I would like to talk more about it, and I'd like to kind of get into the cracks and talk about this. And that one, I was so fortunate because I think that was another Heather episode, but our third on that was Marjorie Conrad, who was actually on America's Next Top Model.
Yeah.
And so her being an actual model, talking about a movie about models, was fantastic. And then she's a filmmaker as well.
That's the way to do it. If you're going to do a show on a subject, that's the comprehensive way to do it. Instead of the half-ass way of doing it. It's just, too often I think people just... I think like about your show is that it's not like a soapbox. I mean, I guess it's a soapbox for the movies, right? For the individual movies. But it's not a soapbox in the other kind of way, which I find there's too much of, especially in social media, the internet, where people are just there to tear something down. Or just to, it's kind of...
Yeah. I think we've only talked about a handful of movies where we actually didn't like them. And, I mean, I really tried to find things to like about something like Battlefield Earth, but...
Yeah.
But I wanted to know again, I mean, some of these shows that we do, it's kind of like it's an autopsy. And it's like, okay, why did this movie end up the way that it was? Yeah, I mean, we're doing a show on World War Z, and it's like, okay, it's an okay movie. It's barely a movie, but it's a movie. And why is it the way that it is? Especially when you look at Max Brooks's book, and you're like, how did that become this. And so looking at all those screenplays in between and reading those drafts and then reading the stories, and it's just like, oh, okay, this is how this became this.
Would you say that University of Michigan was an influence in thinking that way?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. What would you say that is? Would you say it's just kind of interested in how a movie's put together in a craft point of view, or sort of a craft sense? Or
Well, University of Michigan, and you might chafe under this, but at least when I went there, it was much more of a film theory school than a film making school.
Okay.
Maybe had I stuck around for a fifth year, then I think I could have gotten my hands on like a 16 millimeter camera and some better video equipment. But it was like, I'm this weird freak that graduates in 4 years, and they're just like, oh yeah, you shouldn't even apply to be in this class until you're a senior. And then I get in there and I realize, oh, there's all these other classes that I could take after this, but I'm not about to stick around. I'm sorry, this costs way too much.
Oh yeah, the expense in it, yeah.
But, between the film theory that I was getting from like an Ira Konigsberg or a Hugh Cohen or even, Herbert Eagle, and then I go into Susan White's class, and she's talking about, Freudian theory and Lacan and feminist filmmaking and looking at these films, just, taking The Big Sleep apart and looking at all of the different images, and they're taking Chinatown apart and saying like, okay, look at all of the motifs of two eyes and one eye being bad, and it's just those kind of things. Speaking of Big Sleep, did you really light a fire?
Everybody needs an anchor in life. You, me, just everybody. Anchor made this whole show possible. I'm immensely grateful to them. You too can use Anchor to make your own shows and create your own vision. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you. You might have studied the way that I did. Did you study through the Laura Mulvey, Pam Cook thing on Big Sleep? Remember Laura Mulvey had all these graphs on Big Sleep and the intricacy of that script? I think it was one of those theorists, Pam Cook or...
I definitely read Mulvey. I mean, as far as the narrative pleasure essay,
this is the Women in Film Noir. It's a separate.
Yes.
And I think there was a long thing on Big Sleep because we studied it. We used that book. That was in '87 when we did that. So that it's funny you mentioned that because I did that same study.
Oh, it was fantastic.
The Big Sleep is a really tricky movie.
Oh yeah,
that's a mind-boggling movie. I mean, Big Sleep is almost like the James Joyce classical Hollywood film. It's almost like a crying out loud, like Finnegan's Wake.
Oh yeah,
it's not a straightforward movie in any.
Hell no.
In any respect. What do you think about younger audiences? Do you think younger audiences? When I say younger, I mean say someone 16 or 18 or 20. Do you think they're going to be able to sort of look at the Big Sleep and get out of it similar things or?
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as they're willing. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of stuff in the Big Sleep that I don't get. I mean, I pick up weird little things from all over the place. So, like, even looking at, like, I don't know, what type of card Philip Marlowe has in his vehicle to say what type of gas he can get, the whole ration card thing. It's like, okay, if I didn't see someone swap out a ration card in a Warner Brothers cartoon, I think it was the Gremlins swapped it out in the airplane that Bugs Bunny was in, I would have never thought to look for that. I wouldn't have known what that was.
Right.
And it took me years to figure that out because that's not something that they necessarily teach you in school. They're like, oh yeah, they had these different types of rations for things, and you could have an A ration or a B ration, and that's why it was an insult for the Gremlin to swap out the ration card.
That's a complicated business. I mean,
hell yeah.
That's So, are there any? You said that earlier that you wish your show could be better, or you'd want to improve it. What is that? I'm guessing you mean more like technological things, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, it can always sound better.
Yeah, but because that's the only thing I would really. I mean, again, that I have no problems with. I think it sounds great, but I'm just trying to say this guy has a great show. He knows how to talk to people. He has people. gets some pretty cool people on, and he treats them with respect, which I think, again, I wish more people did that.
Well, thank you.
And so I'm saying, what's he got to change? I mean, I guess you could quibble about movies that you want to feature. I may want you to cover The Last Detail or cover Hal Ashby Shampoo, but maybe you have other fish to fry, or you have other, maybe you, I don't know. But that's talking about individual films.
Yeah, next year is not going to make people very happy.
Why? What's happening next year?
I'm focusing in. I was taking, get suggestions from people, and I'll get those. I'll make a list of them. I have a list going of what movies I want to cover, and I was kind of taking those and, shuffling the deck of cards and flipping them together. And I start putting them onto like a map that I do, and I'm just like, okay, January, how do I want to start this thing? Okay, and September, that's going to be Czech films. November is going to be noir. October is going to be horror, and December is going to be whatever. And I'm just like going through all this stuff, and maybe sometimes February is like blaxploitation, but I'm not sure. And I'm just going through this, and I start lining up all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that movie came out in 1969, and then I put another one. I'm like, oh, that one came out in 1969. Oh, and that one came out in 1969. So I'm just going through, and I'm realizing that the theme of next year, or at least probably 50% of the movies, are all being made in the year 1969.
So are you doing model shop?
I am not doing model shop, but I am doing quite a few other things.
Okay.
I am actually spending a whole month next year talking about Cinema Novo, which I've never done before, because I look for blind spots. You've given me all these compliments, but I will say, like, I feel like I don't know shit about shit, and it's like I have yet to see very many, if any, Brazilian films, and hey, why not learn about these? You know,
I mean, the fact that you want to learn about them and watch them is I think that's great. That's really what matters.
I mean, I use the show as an excuse sometimes to challenge myself, and to watch stuff. I mean, you heard the Solaris episode. I couldn't watch Solaris without falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, that's it. Let's do Solaris. And I'll get a pot of coffee on, and I will watch this darn movie.
Well, I mean, what do you make of that? No, I mean, not the going to sleep, but what do you make about the fact that you want to do a show like that, and you have people on that seem to relish talking about Solaris? Clearly, they're not all falling asleep.
No, they're not falling asleep.
They're not falling asleep, and maybe you are, maybe you aren't. You said that you did, but I mean, clearly you got something out of Solaris.
Oh yeah, no, it was fantastic. Once I finally made it through that stupid driving scene, I was all in.
Oh,
that was the barrier to entry, was that driving scene.
Huh? You mean through the tunnels of the 70s?
Yeah,
the 70s highway and.
It was so hypnotic in that music and the way the music was coming up, and it was putting me under. I tried it 3 times, and every single time I was gone. And finally, I just waited. I think I made it probably, if the sequence is 5 minutes, I made it through 4 minutes and 30 seconds each time before I was asleep, and finally just pushed through and made it all the way through.
I mean, there's an aspect of Tarkovsky's films. He would not talk of them in this way, but there's definitely a late 60s head movie, trippy, psychedelic aspect to his work. But that's in the film, but it's also an avant-garde experimental film. Mm-hmm. But the thing about him is that aspect of that aspect of those movies doesn't come from any of those pop things, references.
Right.
For him, they come from his spirituality and his commitment, which is really extraordinary. So
his use of artwork is amazing too.
Yeah, it is amazing. So in other words, but he gets at this place that probably a lot of hippies would have liked, maybe, or people interested in altering their consciousness, because that's kind of what he was into.
That was one of my theories on the show. Was like, do you think that he's hypnotizing you so that you feel the rest of the movie differently? To me, that's a valid thing.
Yeah, I wanted to say that on the show that I agree with that theory.
Oh, good.
I'm reminded that. I mean, I think that's clearly that's what he's trying to do. There's a lot of again, I'm sure you encountered some. Did you encounter film theorists that got you angry because you felt they were kind of getting too far afield of the film or bringing in too many extraneous things that had nothing to do with the film. Have you encountered that, or do you feel that can be a problem? Just wondering.
I used to. There were times in the past where I would think, what are you talking about? You are just, like, oh, I was watching this film, and then, oh God, I'm about to quote Room 237. Oh boy. I was watching this movie, and then my son came in and had a drawing, and it said, I have a splitting headache, and then this clicked, and, and those are the kind of film theorists where it's just like, it's a little much, but... Okay, there's such a thing as synchronicity, and God, I'm trying to remember. There's a word that came up the other day, and it just kept coming up in conversation. I'm just like, what is going on? This is really freaky. But those things happen. But yeah, there were times where when I was younger, I would read film theorists, and I'm just like, yeah, you're kind of going off the deep end here, buddy. But now I crave like the real close readings of stuff, and now I crave like those BFI books or the Devil's Advocates and cultographies. I mean, I love those things. It's like deep dive.
Yeah, if they're good. I mean, you're kind of doing that on your show. You're kind of doing almost a layperson's version of a BFI in a way, right? Is that how you see it?
Yeah,
in a way, you're kind of like a regular guy saying, well, we're going to be like regular guys or regular people, but we're going to have the seriousness of a BFI. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about like Cleo and Leo, we're going to be serious about it. We're going to have the stars of this movie on the thing. And we're going to compare it to Switch. I mean, I strongly disagree with you about Switch. That's all fair. And Blake Edwards, but anyhow, we're going to do it in a BFI way.
But you can listen to the show and disagree.
Oh, sure.
And hopefully I'm not saying things in such a way where I'm just like, if you like this film, you are an idiot. It's right. Like, what does that do? Come on.
Right. I mean, that's the respect part that I've been praising on this show so much, that you have that built in kind of, I think it's civility. And I think maybe you were just born with it, or maybe you acquired it just in life, or maybe it was Britain. Maybe it's a combination of many things. But it serves you well in some of these. And I think in some of these shows, it might really be indispensable. Can you think of a show that you've done where the movie's particularly controversial, maybe, or maybe divisive, where
other than The Last Action Hero,
yeah,
where I almost lost my mind.
Wow.
The episode that we did on what's that movie with Bill Paxton? Near Dark. Okay. That was one of my favorite discussions in the entire world, because I don't like Near Dark.
Really?
My co-host, Rob, on that episode, thought it was pretty good. He was kind of in the middle. And then our other co-host on there, Ed Pettit, loves the movie.
Yeah.
And it was just such a great discussion because, again, we're not tearing each other down. We're just like, well, I didn't really care for this. And it's like, well, I really like that, and here's why I liked it. And I would say, well, here's why I didn't necessarily like it. Yeah. And we had this mutual respect, and it was so nice. And, by the end, nobody's opinions necessarily changed, but it was just such a nice discussion. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. This is what I like. This is what sitting around, having coffee with your friends, and being able to have a discussion.
I mean, this is what your show's about. I mean, so yeah, it's a good example. Like Neo Dark, I mean, as far as Catherine Bigelow movies, where does it rank? Where you're asking, I'm going to rank it pretty towards the bottom, certainly. So I would agree with you on that. On the other hand, I think it's a pretty decent movie. If you sat me in front of it, I would enjoy it. Uh-huh. So I clearly don't hate it, like some things that I hate. But it's Do you think some of those things could just be purely subjective rather than objective? Could they just be?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we talk a lot on the show about the nostalgia factor. I mean, I love the movie Free Jack. Is it a bad movie? Yeah, it's a horrible movie, but I love that movie.
So when you say you loved it, that's a function of when it came out and the age you were when it came out? Is that what you mean by nostalgia?
And then just stupid things like the way that Mick Jagger says furlong, and just stupid stuff like that. I'm just like, this is a goofy freaking movie, but I really like this.
Why do you think that academic kind of people, don't really take seriously the thing you're talking about now, sort of the pleasure aspect of movies? Why do you? They tend to kind of sell it short. With the important exception of Pauline Kael. Of course, Pauline Kael oversold that. She made that everything. That was her one great flaw. But at the least, I'll give her credit. Didn't she put that on the map and sort of saying this is an aspect of movies that's important, this pleasure aspect?
Yeah, I think so.
Why do you think it is that people kind of tend to sort of dismiss that?
I don't know if they necessarily dismiss it or they overly embrace it, and it just becomes this blind faith for movies. I think more of the professional, and I'm doing air quotes, professional critics might try to distance themselves that way, or they might try to couch things and try to defend things because that they like by liking them or for liking them in other things, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, the cinematography was fantastic," or whatever. It's like, yeah, just come out and say, yeah, it's a stupid movie, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but I don't think we have a really good critical language for.
No.
Am I right about that? There's like but I think that's a. But I think that's a problem in criticism. What I mean is that I don't think it's the flaw in the nature of the critical project itself, which I think is wonderful. I think it's critics not having done their job in that way over maybe 50, 60 years. And I think it actually might be connected to certain residual, I don't know, run this by you, what you think, residual hierarchies, like the fact that it's not a text, it's not a written word. Could that be it? Like, I think there's for example, there's all these very late essays on photography that are very anxious about, is photography have any decency to it? Or is it suspect, right? Whether it's Susan Sontag's on photography or whether it's George Bernard Shaw's photography. I think those are both wonderful things on photography, but do you think it's kind of that? It's kind of like a latent, I don't know if it's elitism or kind of about a genre, or the fact that cinema is something everybody looks at.
Yeah, I mean, it is the most democratic art form.
Right.
It's not like we're all rushing to see the latest performance art every weekend or the latest unveiling of a new sculpture or painting or, to your point, of pottery or anything. That is serving so many masters as far as being a work of art, sometimes being pure entertainment sometimes, or being art that is disguised as entertainment, and then you have to feed the beast. I mean, there are very few movies that are being made purely for the love of cinema without having to make a profit.
So does that mean you admire all the more somebody like Tom Noonan, who carves out space for him to do his own projects that are purely
he or Soderbergh, where it's like one for you, one for me. I mean, I love that model. I might not necessarily love every Soderbergh film. Right. I mean, for God's sakes, Ocean 12, forget it. Yeah. But, he knows what sells and does a great job, and then goes out and does whatever the hell he wants. I mean, who makes Schizopolis and makes Kafka? I mean, it's freaking amazing.
I like both those movies a lot. He's clearly a gifted filmmaker.
Oh, hell yeah.
While on the subject of naming names, who are some other filmmakers where you'll say, hell yeah, this person's a master or great, could be living or dead? Who pops into your mind? I know you've had William Friedkin on your show, and by God, talk about a storyteller, right?
Oh, hell yeah. That guy's such a raconteur.
Friedkin is like a showman. He's like an entertainer. So I almost think there's like two William Friedkins. There's Friedkin, the filmmaker, and then kind of like John Waters, he's this Friedkin, the kind of the orator.
Right. Well, it's like Bogdanovich.
Oh, is Bogdanovich that way too? You find him kind of real,
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's so steeped in old Hollywood, and like hearing him actually talk about his projects rather than talk about John Ford or Howard Hawks or Orson Welles, it's like you've got two different people talking about those things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Friedkin comes to mind first, but I guess Bogdanovich is a good talker too. I had forgotten about him as a talker. I mean, you get guys to talk on your show, or women, or who often, on first glance, you might not think of as great talkers, but they become kind of great talkers on your show. Like they start talking. I think it's a system that you have. You have a way of getting people to get going. Like I was just listening to the More American Graffiti.
Right.
And just Candy Clark just comes alive when she talks about, her introduction to Hollywood and the people she met. She's just
she was such a dream.
Yeah, she's and I think that part of that's her, but I think part of it is your format. I don't know what it is. It's just the way you kind of get people to. Maybe it's comfort. Maybe she's comfortable, or the people on that show are comfortable, and they just kind of open up. You've had her on before, right? For Nicholas Rogue, right?
No, actually, that was the first time that we chatted. We had chatted like off the record years and years ago. I had asked her if she would be on an episode because I love the film Citizens Band. Love Jonathan
it's one of my all-time favorite movies.
Right?
Oh my God, Paula
so
Matt.
Good.
Paula Matt is. Oh God, don't get me started. Handle with care.
Yeah.
Oh God, but see again, I'm not trying. But seeing that on the big screen in the actual Grindhouse theater back in the day, that was. I have to say that was just beautiful because you were watching the film. You were watching the film with basically truckers.
Yeah.
Like out enjoying a movie. They weren't they weren't cinema people. They were people that this was that they did for a living, and they really respect. I mean, those are the glory days of going to movies, the 70s and 80s. I think of going when movies were like a religious experience, and the theater's dark, and you're going to see Citizens Band. But anyhow, I'm talking too much. But go ahead. Was it? So it was for that film, or it was for?
Well, I emailed her and I was like, "Hey, I want to have you on." It was a twofer because I had been slowly working on a book, very slowly for God knows how many years, about Elliot Gould and his films from the 1970s, I'm desperately looking for people who are still alive that were in these films.
Oh yeah,
and. I'm like, hey, Candy Clark, you were in, and I'm probably going to be wrong, but I think she was in I Love My Wife. And I was like, hey, can you tell me about this? And she calls me up out of the blue because my phone number is on every email. She calls me up and she's just like, yeah, I didn't really have that much to say about that movie. I was on there really briefly. And she basically she was so sweet. She's calling me up to blow me off. And I'm just like, wow. Thank you. And then I'm like, well, I was also hoping to do an episode about Handle with Care. And she's like, yeah, that movie didn't really make any money. I didn't enjoy it. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm sorry. But then all these years later, I'm like, well, hey, I'm doing this episode about more American Graffiti. And I'm also doing one about The Man Who Fell to Earth. And I know she loves Man Who Fell to Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe she'll talk about that. So... yeah, she got right back to me. This time she didn't call me. She emailed me. She's like, yeah, no problem. We set up a time, and God, she was so easy to talk to. And I was afraid because of that previous phone call. I was just like, oh, she's going to, because I ease in, I think at the end of the end of the conversation about Man Who Fell to Earth, I ease into Handle with Care.
Oh, yeah.
And then she starts to talk about it. I'm like, okay, thank God.
Well, you did it. You did it in the right way, and she opened up about it because this is the Mike White system. It's a system. It's organic. It's not affected. It comes out of you, but it's a way of getting things to happen. Just like you got Nicholas Rogue to go on and on for how long did he talk? He doesn't rest in peace. One of the greatest filmmakers, Nicholas Rogue. You got him on your show, and he went into a stream of consciousness. Am I right? On your show. Talk about that. What were you? He was like there was no. Does he speak in commas or are there? It's a way of speaking. Periods.
Yeah, he just went there, and I was like, okay.
Well, what do you want to
buckle up?
When was that? What film was it? Is it Sensual Obsession a bad timing, or was it?
Yeah, it was for bad timing.
Yeah.
I would have done more, and I probably will do more of his films. I know, actually, going back to Maitland, she's writing a book about performance, so I can't wait for that. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I hope I didn't let a cat out of the bag, but I don't think I did.
I know I'm going to buy and read it. I still have her book on the Argento's early film, The Crystal Plumage, I think.
She wrote that whole Broken Minds, Broken Mirrors thing.
Broken Minds, Broken Mirrors, which is still on my cinema shelf.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That means I think that highly of it. She's up there with Jonathan Rosenbaum and any Manny Farber or anybody else you can think of. I think she's that good. Anyhow, but did you know he was going to go off like that? I mean, that was kind of...
No.
And what were you thinking? I started writing down what he was talking about, but it was something about... What was it? It was something about changes in how you film something, or...
Yeah, I didn't... I'll be 100% honest. I'm not sure if I understood everything that he was saying.
Yeah.
If I am 100% honest, I'll tell you one of the things that was going through my mind is I have to get to work because I had to call him at 8 o'clock in the morning on a work day because he's in England. He wanted to do it on a weekday. So I'm just like, okay. And he talked for probably an hour, and I'm just like, oh shit, I'm going to be late for work.
Oh.
But that's okay. I mean, the sacrifices we have to make.
Wow. For Nicholas Rogue, did you tell him that you were late for work?
No, I'm not about to tell him that.
No?
No.
Well, I mean,
anyone who is generous with their time, and that's the thing I always thank people for, is thanking them for their time, because no one is making any money off of this show, me included. So I am not, I've actually had people, I probably won't name names, but I've had people say like, okay, well, what do you, they'll ask it in a weird way. Like one of my friends, Chris, he just got asked the other day, is there an honorarium for this? And it's like, no. And then somebody would ask like, what do you charge for interviews? And I always respond, nothing. They're absolutely free. I will never charge anyone to interview them.
Yeah.
So we won't talk about the whole stipend thing that I have to pay you to be on this podcast, but
I mean, I'm being
we'll
observed.
Leave that on the cutting room floor.
I'm being totally observed when I talk about mentioning to Nick Rogue about your job, but there's something about him as a person that leads me to think you could almost mention that. You could mention that to him, and it would make it for an interesting conversation. I have no idea why, but
he was so fantastic. I was so lucky. I mean, I count my lucky stars for so many people that I've had the pleasure. I mean, just the other day, this kind of is going to date this episode, but just the other day with Sid Haig passing away.
Oh,
he was one of the best interviews, and I was so lucky. I got to interview that guy 3 times over my career, and I was just, he was so generous with his time and so nice.
We'll talk about a man who was prolific as an actor.
Oh, yeah, and no ego. That guy had...
not only that, but he works so much.
Oh, yeah.
Did the guy ever sleep? I mean, what was his schedule? I'm sure you got into... I haven't listened to Spider Baby. Was that the show you... So is it going to be... what movies did you cover of his?
So the first time I talked to him, it was actually for a print interview, and it was for, I think it was Cashier's to Cinemark number 17.
Yeah.
And he was a guest of honor at a film festival in Port Huron, Michigan.
Okay.
And one of the things that one of the people that ran the film festival, they're just like, hey, Mike, do you want to talk to Sid Haig? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I do. So they arranged it. So we got to sit down at the Thomas Edison Inn and talk for probably talk for about an hour or so. And I just got to ask him whatever I wanted. So I was asking a lot about his early days working with Jack Hill, asking a little bit about working with Graydon Clark, because actually I had seen him years before. I had was doing an event with Graydon down in Indiana, and here comes Sid Haig as we're setting up the table. Here comes Sid Haig, and he just starts walking up to him, and he's like, "Should I put my dancing shoes on?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a reference to Lambada, the Forbidden Dance." I'm like, okay, that's cool. And he's just like shooting the shit with Graydon. I just make myself scarce because I'm not about to glom on and be like, I'm Graydon's friend. But yeah, got to talk to him about working with Graydon.
Yeah.
Got to hear his side of the story, why his character is mute in the Forbidden Dance. But yeah, just all these amazing stories, like all of it, like him going over to the Philippines and learning the ropes over there, like who to tip and who not to tip, and how he would constantly be handing out dollar bills to all the people that worked at the hotel that he stayed at, and then by the time he came back the next time to shoot, everybody at the hotel knew him and would have his, morning paper, his coffee, and his breakfast all ready for him every single day. And he was like, they treated me like a king just because I gave them respect and I gave them $1.
Well, it's funny. We're both talking about exploitation films now, which is a word I really hate and I really don't like. What's your feeling about that word? I never really know what that.
I mean, I can't say it's necessarily a genre, but at least it gives you some sort of basis on what to talk about. I know some people really hate the term blaxploitation because it's like, I was not exploited making these films. They're very positive for African American images, and I'm like, yes, I understand that, but it's way less of a mouthful than to say action films from the 1970s starring a primarily African-American cast. You know, it's sum it up in one word.
So you say it's kind of a taxonomic shorthand.
Yeah, I mean, you say nudie cuties, you say exploitation films.
But, I just want to press on this because I'm not, because nudie cutie, I mean, I'm not really sure what that really means. Like, so for example, like there are films that have high sexual content, right?
Right.
And then there are
so that would be like a sexploitation film that is independent, smaller budget, and
like a Joe Sarno picture, like Sin in the Suburbs or Joe.
Exactly. Yeah, and then you get into like roughies, which are a little harder edge, and maybe you're talking Roberta Finlay or just a little harder action. But yeah, I mean Sarno, my God, that guy, what they call the Ingmar Bergman of 42nd Street. His films are gorgeous to look at.
Yeah, there's his beautiful black and white movie about the budding filmmaker that's like having an identity crisis. Do you know what this one? It's from '69.
Oh, God.
Why is my brain freezing? It's like very Bergman. It's very, the black and white is incredible in this film, and I can't think of the name of the damn thing.
And knowing you probably saw it in the theater.
No, I'm not that. No, this was 60,
okay.
So that would have been age 4, or no, actually I've been age, so definitely not. I want to make things clear. I started seeing movies, with my dad, sort of like ages 7, 8, 9, 10, not as a toddler. No, I wasn't a baby. So this is older Sarno, so that's true. But I appreciate that. But you're not too far off. But if somebody didn't know about these films, do you think it's possible that these labels might turn them off, or they might avoid something that they might actually like because of the kind of the associations, which are kind of false? That's all I mean. It's sort of like you talk about nudie cutie. I mean, some of those movies might actually be kind of like good movies.
Oh, yeah.
They just happen to have nudity in them. Some of them might be kind of junk. And so I guess the problem with these labels is they don't really help you to really... They're kind of, I don't know, they're just kind of... I never really know whether they're valid.
There's junk in any genre, I mean, what do they call the H.G. Lewis, the gore films, and it's like, I love those movies. And some gore films are absolute garbage, and others are, to me, absolutely brilliant. I mean, I love Blood Feast. I love Color Me Blood Red. I mean, there are so many good movies in that thing. I mean, I'm just talking H.G. Lewis right now, but I know that there were other gore films, and some of them were pretty terrible.
So you like Color Me Blood Red about the failed artist and failed painter has to start,
I mean, yeah, it's right up there with Bucket of Blood.
Right.
But it's pretty much the same story.
It is the same. So if somebody, what would you have to say to somebody? Because I'm kind of weird. I kind of want to turn on people to these things that might otherwise be kind of afraid of them. And that's kind of, I'm not saying that's a project I actually engage in, but I often think, how can we get these movies a larger audience or get people to, I don't know, that's kind of a strange idea.
That's one of the goals of my show is to try to talk about things in a hopefully somewhat, maybe a little intelligent manner, and try to, take away the mystique a little bit and say, like, there's this whole world that maybe you're not necessarily familiar with. Like, I'm not familiar, like I said before, with Cinema Novo. I'm not familiar with, there's tons of filmmakers where I'm just like, I've never seen a movie by this guy, and I really want to. So, let's talk about it. And hopefully me being somewhat of a novice and then also having read up on some of this stuff as much as I possibly can, it's like, they can hopefully learn through me being an idiot, saying like, okay, if this guy can understand this, then maybe I can too. And it sounds like there's something of merit here.
So while we're getting, I think, towards the end of this wonderful episode, because you're talking about your system and your method, I'm going to throw some things at you and see what you come up with. If you had to name 3 exploitation films other than Black Shampoo that come to your mind that are must-sees And any could be action, it could be horror. What comes to mind that you want people to see this film just to sake of?
Oh gosh,
It's tough, but
I mean, I love Orgy of the Dead.
okay.
It is absolutely ridiculous, and there are parts of it that will bore you to tears, but it is just such a sight to see, and just that dialogue is so amazingly wooden, and I mean, it's just so much fun, you know? I love The Mac. The Mac is a very strange film for me because I always describe it as being less than the sum of its parts because I love the parts to it, but as a whole, I don't think it necessarily holds together. But God, there's some amazing parts to that. And that score, that Willie Hutch score, oh, yeah, good Lord. Yeah. And then kind of keeping on that blaxploitation tip, I'll say Coffee, which we haven't done on the show yet, but Coffee, man, oh man, that is such a fantastic film.
Yeah, it's a superb film. You're gonna have Pam Grier on, I hope, and discuss Coffee.
I had Pam Grier on for an episode, and I would love to have her back because we ended up talking about one that she did recently called Bad Grannies. And it's one of those like, hey, here's this new film with Pam Grier. Do you want to talk to her? Of course I want to talk to her. But then we mostly, you got to play the game. And I was just like, okay, I'll talk to you mostly about Bad Grannies. I will ask you about how you knew Russ Meyer. I mean, there's another amazing filmmaker right there. It's like, how did you know Russ Meyer? How were you in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls? Why don't I see you? Wow. those kind of things. But I didn't talk about Coffee because I knew that I would talk to her for probably in half an hour, and I only had 20 minutes. Yeah. And that's one thing that I think folks need to understand, too. It's like, I recently interviewed Leslie Ann Warren, and if I had my druthers, I would have talked to that lady for probably 4 hours because she is amazing. But I had 20 minutes.
Leslie Ann Warren, for what film? Was it for Choose Me?
No, it was for a new movie that she's in called 3 Days with Dad. So it's one of those, like, the press is going to set it up. I'm going to do my job, but I'm also going to sneak in some questions and say, tell me about Color of Night. Let's talk a little bit about Alan Rudolph. Let's talk a little bit about It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman the Musical. But you got to sneak that stuff in and then say, okay, now let's talk about the movie that you're here to promote.
About the movie.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say about Leslie Ann Warren? When's that show gonna?
Just dropped yesterday.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I gotta watch that. Listen to that.
So yeah, I talked to her and I talked to Larry Clark, who is not the creepy Larry Clark, but the nice guy who's named Larry Clark, who actually directed that one. Mm-hmm. And same thing, he was in the last season of Twin Peaks, so of course I got to ask him about that because I'm a huge David Lynch fan.
So you've watched The Return?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah, same here. It's tremendous. It's a tremendous film.
What was that, episode 8? The one with the woodsman and the whole nuclear explosion.
Yeah, it's really.
That's one of the best things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything quite like it. I think he actually topped himself. I think it's his strongest filmmaking.
Oh yeah,
actually, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those episodes are some of my favorite episodes that I've done. Are the David Lynch ones.
Yep. Yep. So those are, we just talked about it, but if you had to pick a kind of an alternative or avant-garde type movie, that style film, if that's a fair category, 2 or 3 that you would recommend, say you must see this. What comes to mind in that order?
Does Possession count? The Zulawski film?
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, or I mean, if you want to get really nutty, go see On the Silver Globe. That'll mess you up. Same thing I would say for with The Holy Mountain. I had a brilliant time talking about The Holy Mountain, and that's a movie that you can just keep digging into forever. And then I'm going to go a little nuts. I'm going to say Hasten, because I consider that pretty avant-garde, especially for when it was made. And that movie still packs a punch. And I mean, I'll probably sit down and watch it over Halloween this year.
Uh-huh. Okay, so what about somebody who says the funniest movie, comedy, 30s or 40s, or comedy that period, or maybe modern comedy?
30s and 40s. You're talking Arsenic and Old Lace.
Okay.
Love that film.
Okay.
I mean, God, Peter Lorre, Cary Grant. I mean, Cary Grant's comic timing was just so good. And to that end, I mean, His Girl Friday is one of those movies that I just appreciate more every single time I see it.
So you would say His Girl Friday more than Bringing Up Baby, or?
You know, I still haven't really clicked with Bringing Up Baby. I need to try it again. That one and the Philadelphia Story. I need to try those movies again.
Philadelphia Story is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, wow.
And I actually have now like 40-page essay on that film.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Sitting in my drawer. That's how much I love that movie. I don't want to go into, again, that's another topic of another time, but just throwing it out there. It's a movie I happen to really love.
It's a great one.
What about 50s, 60s for comedy?
Gosh, it's a good one. I mean, I'm trying to think of because I'm not a big fan of like the overblown ones, like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. I never have gotten into that movie. I mean, I tend to go more for like 70s stuff with, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. Well, how about dramas of 50s and 60s? If you think like a melodrama, like what?
Oh God, like the Cirque stuff, like Leave Her to Heaven or some of those.
What would you pick out of those?
I can't. I would say that that's another blind spot. I don't know that much about those movies, and I think I've seen more Cirque than I realize. But I only saw a few of those for like a women in cinema class. Right. So, and we saw the classics. We saw like Now Voyager and Mildred Pierce, and we saw at least, I think, Leave Her to Heaven is the one with was that Lana Turner in that? Oh, I can't remember.
Imitation of Life.
Imitation of Life. Thank you. But what was Leave Her to Heaven? That was who was the woman who was running the bookstore across the street that Bogart went to in The Big Sleep? Because it was that lady was in.
Oh, it's you're talking about Lauren Bacall?
No, the one who ran the bookstore across the street, who she looks much better without her glasses on, is what he tells her.
Oh, I don't know who that is. Who is that?
I'm going to find out in just a second.
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
So you're talking about In the Big Sleep.
So that's Dorothy Malone, who works across the street. That's right. And then she was in Written on the Wind. That's what it is. Thank you. Whew.
Written on the Wind is a lot of people, that's their favorite Cirque.
Oh, that's the one for sure that I saw, and I really enjoyed it.
That's their favorite Cirque. How do you feel about Bigger Than Life by Nicholas Ray?
I haven't seen that one yet.
Okay.
I'm kind of making my way through his filmography. I mean, I can't. It's hard to not just go back to. Oh God, why am I forgetting the name? In a Lonely Place. I mean, that movie it kicks my ass every single time. I love it.
Yeah. Don't you just want to kind of, when you see something like In a Lonely Place, want to tell everybody about it?
Oh yeah.
Go out and see it.
That's why we did an episode on it.
In a Lonely Place, a relevant film for 2019.
Oh, hell yes.
It's totally undated, right? It could be made about things this morning in human... Don't you think in America and human...
Well, that and then the book, which is so different. No screenwriters involved in the book, but my God, that book is fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you've got great taste, and I hate saying goodbye, Mike White, but every show has to come to an end, and this show has to come to an end. And I really loved having you on, and I like you as a role model and inspiration for having a show that has high curiosity and respect for the guests, and lets the guests unfold and talk about what's important to them and the movies. And I appreciate what you're doing immensely. So
thank you so much for having me on. This was great.
Thank you. And if any questions, you want to do this again sometime and talk about a movie, let me know.
All right.
Do it.
Fantastic. Sounds like you got some great tips as well, my friend.
Thank you. All right. Have a good day.
All right. Oh, hey. I will shoot you a link to my audio if you want to use it.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
Okay. Sounds good. All right.